roll call. I have just mentioned Jason. I need a volunteer to take some minutes. As we don't have a secretary yet. We'll do that at the next meeting. What I really am, to me is really important is that we capture all the action items that the district agrees to furnish information requested, etc., and that anything that we have ourselves, and then of course votes on actions, resolutions, etc. We have, as Don's recording the video. Personally, I always make an audio for myself. I've just got in the habit of doing that over the years. So really, and those are all published. They're published, they're posted on the website. So that's really, we have a full record of all the discussions and some things some of us might not want to be in the public record. But anyway, I just need a volunteer. Do I have anybody raising their hand?
John, if there's no volunteers, we can assign it to our staff here to do the minutes.
Okay, and they can work with me. Because it's kind of having this experience as a chair before, it's pretty difficult to capture everything as you're moving forward. Well, so with that, let's do the roll call. John Anderson, I'm here. Joseph he may be joining later, but he's a work meeting. Maisha Cole. Guadalupe.
Here.
Lorraine.
Here.
Jason's absent, and Sally.
Here.
As I said when we were talking earlier, in terms of the agenda, Sally, you still have a time constraint?
Yes, my class starts at 4 on Zoom, and so I'll have to be off of here at 3:45.
Okay, so what I would like to do is that after the district presentations, I'd like to move items H and J and K, the proposed board policy discussions, and the resolution up before the consent items and Lorraine's annual report update. Is there any objection to that? If not, we'll approve that by consent. Now this next item is let's get into bond program updates.
Excuse me, sir. You didn't ask for public comment.
Oh,
on
I'm sorry. I'm reading my agenda too fast. Okay, so we're open for public comment.
I have my hand raised.
Okay.
This is for approval. I'm talking about approval agenda. I would like to have the February minutes approved up, removed from consent calendar.
Do we have a committee member that agrees with that?
Why, Anton?
There's a material error in regards to the audit. And as I understand it, under the Brown Act, the public is able to speak to any item on the agenda.
Oh, so when you pull it, does that mean you want to speak about it? Is that what you're?
Yes, and the way the agenda reads, it only can be pulled by a member of the committee, which means I don't have an opportunity to speak to it because it's going to approve on consent.
So if a committee member pulls it, they don't, it's not necessarily they want to talk about it, but they want it up for talk, up for discussion.
Yes,
Is that it?
that's fine.
Correct.
Right. I'll pull it.
Okay. Anyone else from the public?
My hand is up, Don. Thank you. I have two concerns that I want to bring forth today. The first is the need and importance of ensuring that the minutes of the CBOC meetings are posted as soon after the meeting as possible. The public wants access to minutes as quickly as possible, so when they don't show up on agendas until much later, not only is this frustrating, but it sends a message that the body is trying to conceal something. At the last CBOC meeting, I announced that I, as the CBOC chair, would provide the requested amended minutes to the April 1st joint meeting, and that I would provide the minutes for the May 17th meeting as well. Both of these minutes were forwarded several days prior to the CBOC agenda being posted, but they were excluded from this packet. This was disappointing on many levels. The second item of importance is the statement in this agenda, which declares that only members of the CBOC can remove items from the consent calendar. As Anton just pointed out, that's in violation of the Brown Act. And first off, every city council in West County allows members of the public to remove items from the agenda, and even this Board of Education allows this. So I'm having trouble understanding why the CBOC has changed their longstanding policy that prohibits the public from pulling a consent item. The message being sent when only the CBOC can pull a consent item is that there is something that the CBOC wants to simply ram through without public comment. I can't imagine this being the case, but that's what we're seeing with this statement on the agenda. And I would just advise you to amend that. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we'll close the public comments and move on to the district budget status and financial reports with Lewis and Melissa.
So Mrs. Mejia Hooper will present the project status report today for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. So starting up off the top, we have our planning, which is our HVAC assessment. So this is the assessment that's going on as part of the facility master plan. And it is looking at over 30 schools. We have completed most of the assessments now. So we are getting, we hope to have all of the assessments done this week. And that would lead us to the report writing, as well as just being able to use that information as part of our options development portion of the facility master plan. For Cameron and Collins, both of these schools have very similar scopes. They are the HVAC additions. The existing heating system does not have air conditioning and limited ventilation. So both of these projects are rolling forward with schematic design, almost complete, moving into design development. We're just making the final decisions on which option of HVAC unit we would like to go forward with and how that fits in the existing campus. Hercules Middle School, High School is a critical needs project where we're planning on building a new science building. We do have a small site committee, which is going to meet to review some of the options and concepts that the architect has put forward to get some initial feedback on how that will affect the campus. And so that's planned for next week. And we are at the tail end of schematic design, moving into design development. For Shannon, the critical needs project is a new NPR building to replace the existing portable one. We are at the tail end of schematic design there, looking at some design options to reduce cost before moving into design development. Riverside site improvements, this is really the, when we do the soil stabilization, we're going to displace some of the playground structures. So we are re-looking at the main playground area to see how best it can be utilized to accommodate kindergarten as well as the 1 through 6 program. We've done some initial concepts and options that were presented to the principal last week. And so now that we have some direction, we're going to be moving forward into the architectural design, formal architectural design phases. For Korematsu fall protection, we've had some good news verbally back from DSA. We are still technically waiting for the written paperwork, so I'm not going to like jinx it by over promising before it's actually physically in our hands, but we're feeling very good that this might come out of DSA. For the procurement, the E-rate year 24 is waiting on the E-rate funding, so that's just going to be sitting there for a while until that process moves through. Lake, we are very close to naming our best value firm for the design build team. And so once that gets awarded, we will move into the design there beyond what was in the bridging documents. Pinole Valley High School, we have our bidding that is due on June 30th. And so you see the actual fields project listed as well as an RFPQ for the testing and inspection. So those are components that we need to be able to complete the construction. So it's important that we have all of our various testing agencies and inspectors on board for when we start construction. So we are doing an RFQ process for those. Going into design build, Riverside, the soil stabilization project is starting construction today. So that was very exciting. We have temporary fences that have gone in this morning, and they're doing an initial clear out of the site so that they can get in the heavy equipment. So the first construction activities you will see out there are the tree removal process. And then last but not least, we have the E-rate year 23, where they're still going through the various sites to be able to complete that work.
Ellen,
Yes.
I have a question on, so you're starting the soil stabilization this week.
Yes.
When do they expect to have their rigs out there mixing the soil?
So the mixing of the soil won't happen until mid-July.
Oh, okay. So all you're doing is clearing right now.
So yes, they're only clearing right now. So we've got to get some big trees out of there. But before we can get the big trees out, we have to get our big equipment in. So we're clearing and kind of doing some soil work to make a clear path that's level enough for them to get the rigs out.
So who's the I think I asked Louis this before, but I didn't recognize, who's the subcontractor actually doing the stabilization?
Isn't that NGO or is that?
NGO is your geotech, but NGO, so it's not Conan Johnson. I'd have to look it up though.
All right.
We'll get back to you, John, and let you know.
Just shoot me a note. I'll go out there. I can see that operation from that other street on the other side of the creek. I just want to see, from my own curiosity, what kind of rigs they're using. But
and
yeah,
we've started a web page for that. So that is posted on our, if you go to the facility master plan implementation, you'll see on the right-hand side our active projects, and Riverside's one of them. And in that web page, there's the ability to sign up for a newsletter, as well as the title picture shows a picture of the rig.
okay. So, all right. Any other questions?
Yes, from the public.
Don?
Ellen, can you kind of expand for us, please, on what is taking so long with the Korematsu fall protection? It seems like it's been a very long time in the hands of DSA.
Yes, well, first, we had to restart the process differently. We were originally doing it as what you call CCD, which is basically a change order to the original project. DSA was evaluating it that way and then decided that they didn't want to do it that way anymore. So we had to submit it separately. And then it's strange, but there's an actual structure system that you install, and those are normally pre-approved through DSA, and so you don't have to submit the structural calcs for those. But in this particular case, they wanted to see the structural calcs. So, but we can't get, the architect can't do that because it's a pre-designed system. So we had to go through the actual supplier of that system. And so all of those things take a long time. And then we responded to everything in back check, and they brought forward 3 more questions that they wanted answered. And so the verbal approval that I heard was for the additional 3 items that they wanted past what they asked for in back check. I don't know, DSA gets what they want.
All right.
Melissa, do you want to go through the financial?
Sure. This month's financial report, as you could kind of hear from the project status report, the majority of our projects at this time are in design or procurement. And so when it comes to the transactions that you'll see, if we jump to page 22, which is our variance, and I apologize, it got mixed into report 13 and putting together the packet. But you can see that we had a burn rate of 1.5 for the month of May. We have begun our financial year close, and so we will continue to bring forward the monthly reports. But because our fiscal year ends in June, our reports going forward will be preliminary till we officially close the books. No other major updates to the financial reports to mention at this time, other than what is detailed in our accounts payable checklist, which represents the 1.5 million of expenditures in May. And so if there aren't any questions on the financial reports, and not seeing any, I will kind of continue on. And so what we also have to share with you.
I have one.
Okay, go for it, Lorraine. Excuse me, Ms. Humes.
Could we look at number 2, report number 2?
Sure.
And let's look at, well, at Highland, I'm sorry, the consolidated report that would show Highland. Yeah. Let's see here, here it is. You can see it's the 747. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. These $747.125. That's for the water and power upgrade. It's a critical need. It's been on the books for about a year. And it's a quarter of total budget almost. What's the holdup there, and how is that affecting the school?
So I can speak to that. So the original scope of the Highland Critical Needs was actually to upgrade the sewer system there, and that was actually done already. But we do realize that we have some issues with our water source to that campus if the campus is going to maintain for a long period of time. So Highland has been kind of in this parking place at the moment, waiting for the finalization of the prioritization list to come out to figure out where Highland might fall within our rebuild. And if Highland does not, let's just say if it does not surface up, we would go back and reevaluate these and see what we're going to do as far as upgrading the water system for the school and the power.
Okay. So you're hoping to do a whole modernization and take it and do that at that time?
Well, yeah, it's on the prioritization list, right?
Yeah,
So I'm just kind of waiting to see where that might fall and how far out it might be. And that would help us determine whether we move forward with this or not. And that's why it's been kind of parked.
Now, it's not a potability problem, is it, with the water?
No, it's not. And so we really discovered it right after we replaced the sewer line. We had a main line break, and It's just the piping is old and it's been patched a couple times, and so it's being more proactive about it and replacing the system. That way we don't have a failure during the school year and run the risk of shutting down the water to the campus.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I sure am glad he took that question. So I'm going to happily move you forward to page 30. And so included in, oh, I'll make it a little bit smaller. So included in the packet and available on the website are staff's response to the numerous recommendations that we received to the program management plan. And I will admit that staff's response, you'll see a couple of different responses, that something was implemented, that something was revised, or that something was updated. One of the things that was hard to do, or proved to be harder than I thought it would be in this process, is some of the recommendations that were made were very specific, right? So change this language to this language. Okay, we implemented it, no problem, we made that change. But there's actually significant changes that were made from the program management plan draft that was available in September of last year to the one that was finally published. And so for some of these items, the revision that was made kind of throughout the document, or it was something that on a couple of them, it says this has been removed, so it's no longer in the plan. So we really did try our best to address almost all of the recommendations in the publication of the PMP that we now have. But I understand if there's some ambiguity about what staff's response specifically means to that recommendation, because sometimes it was hard to pinpoint how that change was made reflective throughout the whole document. So what I will say is if anybody has specific recommendations or specific questions about any one of the previous recommendations made, because we could truly see through the comments that were provided how much time, attention, and detail went into them, we're happy to answer that through email and provide additional information. But it is here, it's available for your review. There were recommendations that were made that are not reflected here. For example, we heard that the procurement section itself was very repetitive and redundant. And so it kind of got an overall facelift, where the section itself really kind of broke down what a procurement process looks like, and then broke it into the different code sections, because our work is governed by so many different types of statutes. So we're proud of what's published, but as part of our ongoing commitment, that's just our plan, right? And our plan is a living document and something to be updated and followed. And I look forward to sharing at our next meeting some of the videos that we're working on, as promised, to really help make this plan more accessible to everyone in the community. And with that, I conclude my presentation for today. If there are any additional questions.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, as discussed earlier, we're going to jump to the item J, which is a discussion of the proposed revision to board policy 7214.2 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Sally, Lorraine, and I spent a lot of time after this was introduced, coming up with proposed action that we have at the end of this, but we'll go through the discussion. I'm sure a couple of both Don, Gosney, and Anton will have some comments as well. But we, I think, our first reaction when we saw the board agenda published, I think, right before Memorial Day. And to look at this, this is a complete, I don't know what the appropriate word would be right now, but it basically takes away all the independence of the CBOC as required by the Cal Ed Code. And then, you know, we have an existing board policy that was like last updated formally in 2015 after the civil grand jury report. There were a few points in there relative to the makeup of the committee that I could find that seemed to be the associated with that. But so the three of us got together and we have some documents. Sally, I'll let Sally speak to her. It was her reaction that she'd written out to comment. Now, fortunately, the board pulled this from their agenda, and it's understand that it's on the agenda for the facilities committee this Wednesday. What I saw last night in the packet was essentially the item out there for discussion is the revised board policy as was attached to the board for its first reading. Oh, there's one other thing on that agenda is that there is a new member of the CBOC being interviewed and hopefully will be approved. And my understanding is that candidate is Tom Panis. So anyway, Sally, do you want to take over?
Sure. I'll make my comments. My comments focus on language used by prior boards. We have mostly a new board of education right at the moment, but prior trustees made choices and decisions when they put together a bond measure, especially the last one, or I should say without exception, the last one continue to be qualified as a Proposition 39 bond measure because it was put forth with a threshold of 55% instead of 2/3. So the way I see it is the Board of Education in the past had a choice. They chose to have a CBOC because they chose the lower threshold of 55%. They could have done without a CBOC entirely if they'd simply put the bond measure on the ballot at a 2/3 threshold. But they must have thought that they couldn't pass it at 2/3. Maybe they could, maybe they couldn't. Who knows? But anyway, they made their choice. And in addition to that, when they made that decision, and the last decision of this sort was made, I think it was not even 2 years ago by the board. It was in September of 2019, I believe. And when they put together the bond measure language, they emphasized the independence of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that would be put in place to oversee expenditures associated with these bond measures. This was the fifth bond measure. R was the fifth bond measure of this sort in West County. There were 4 others in the past, and they all had similar language emphasizing the independence. In one case, there was all caps in the bond measure that read, "All bond expenditures will be monitored by an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee." That was one of 4 places where the word independent, in another case, strict citizens oversight was used. So this is on top of the laws that pertain to CBOCs. This is simply a promise made by the Board of Education in this county to put together an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that would have strict oversight. So I don't know what other people think the words strict and independent mean, but I think most voters thought that the CBOC would be exact, demanding, rigorous, autonomous, and self-governing. I don't know how else one can interpret words like independent and strict. And nobody forced these trustees to make these decisions. They used these words. They made these promises. So the present trustees now have the responsibility to fulfill these promises. And instead, they're considering policy changes which appear to be stripping any semblance of independence out of the CBOC. And I don't think that that will be lost on our local voters. I think they will take note of that. And that will affect how they decide to vote on future bond measures. I think that that could be devastating for future funding associated with this district. So I'm really shocked. And this is why I think we need to vote to approve this resolution and make it very, very clear that this Bond Oversight Committee is independent. First of all, it states it in the law, and secondly, they made a promise in their bond measure language. So what would be lost if the present trustees decided to not fulfill these promises? I mean, trust, obviously. So we need to stop this, and they need to refuse to consider these changes. That's what I had to say.
Lorraine, do you have anything to say?
Yes, am I muted?
No,
Can you
I
hear me?
can.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Sally about, and John about the independence. The idea that someone would tell you when you meet, if you can meet, what's on the agenda, you control the agenda, you control what's said at the meetings. You cannot talk to other people unless you go through this authorization officer. I can assure you, when we had our talks last year, there was no mention of an authorization officer. And to me, this seems oppressive and dictatorial. And I think it takes away the independence of the committee. Also, I don't like the way it was done. In the bylaws of the board, under policies, it says, as necessary, the superintendent or designee shall notify staff, parents, guardians, students, and other stakeholders whenever a policy that affects them is adopted or revised. And none of that was done. The first time we even heard about this was in February, and all it said on the agenda for the facilities was CBOC, nothing, no explanation. So we went to that meeting, and that's when they started talking about it. And then at the meeting, from Lewis's comments, we have the transcription of it. The idea was to put this forth, let people think about it, come back again and discuss it. Well, this happened on the November 12th. Their March 17th, their April 2nd meetings, nothing was on the agenda about CBOC board policy. They didn't have a meeting in April. And then June, they have a special meeting, not a regularly scheduled public meeting, but a special meeting. And they put this forth for the first reading. Now, according to their policy, they don't need a second reading, but it was just pushed through too fast, the dictatorial nature of the wording. It definitely is against the law. You know, you have the letter of the law and you have the spirit of the law. The letter of the law, they tried to follow exactly. You know, you'll have 7 people. The law says at least 7 people. And it says you may look into. It doesn't say that's all you can look into. So I just am anti this board policy. I think we have to go back to the drawing board, and it doesn't look like they're interested in going to a drawing board. It's mentioned on the meeting, but it doesn't say anything about any discussion other than maybe we'll have 90 seconds to talk about it on the agenda. So it doesn't look good right now. So I think we need this resolution to let the board know that we are serious about this, very serious. And we would like a little more oversight on this board policy than has happened in the past. They're all new. The people are all new. They don't, I don't want them, and they don't look like they're going to be a red stamp board. And we will make sure that they don't do that in this case. That's all I have.
The other thing I had, there's an email in there that I sent to the board members. I was out of town on a business trip so I didn't have an opportunity to speak at the board, but what I have in that email is pretty much mirrors what Lorraine just said. But I also added a point back in 2015. There was a civil grand jury report, and the title was A Case of Stymied Oversight, and it dealt with a lot of the issues that we've been talking about. Don and Anton have been talking about in the past year, relative to just throwing up the roadblocks. It also dealt with the makeup of the board at that time. And there were some pretty good suggestions in there, including one relative to training the CBOC members, having some form of training, particularly on the Brown Act. And there also was a very good suggestion on there to really how to keep the independence of the CBOC, the makeup of how the members are selected. So I don't know how many people were aware of that report. Again, the board is new. And a lot of the people in the general population aren't aware of the civil grand jury, which is the county's ombudsman for county, local, and special district entities in Contra Costa County. And then I also attached in this, our record of the discussion here is the actual grand jury report, and then what's called the compliance and continuity report, which is gives the answers to the recommendations that were made by the grand jury. And then also, Lorraine just alluded to it, the committee, there's a transcript of the facilities committee meeting on the 12th. And then back in around the end of March, I wrote an email to my representative, and I think it's trustee Gonzalo Hoy, that kind of outlined some of the same things that we've discussed here, because I was concerned about some of the comments that I saw in that transcript. So that's all I have to say. Guadalupe, do you have anything to add?
Okay, I couldn't unmute, I'm sorry. I mean, you guys are all on, I'm on board with what everyone's saying. I think there's been a lot of you know, talk about how we approach the school board when it comes to this item. And I think some have been more lenient with the school board than others to, you know, on how the approach is. And I think right now we're seeing the outcome of the work that we actually did throughout the last year. And I think, you know, not trying to pressure, you know, and see the good side has really made it to where now we're stuck. And I think right now we have to, you know, have those conversations, those hard conversations with the board, and making sure that they understand our place, and making sure that we are pressuring them to, you know, this is what, you know, on a hard stance. And I, you know, I think if we don't push hard to get our you know, the things that we're pushing met, then it's not gonna work. So I think right now we really have to, you know, stand our ground and make sure that, you know, they know what the requirements are, what we want, and, you know, stop giving, you know, everyone the benefit of the doubt. I know we do have a new board, but like I said before, you know, they have been part of this district a long time, and, you know, we can't have one person dictating where the, you know, the direction that the board goes. And right now we have dictatorship. So I think it's time that we just kind of hover around and make sure that you know, that we're really standing firm on where, you know, the direction that we want the CBOC to go in, and stand our ground.
Yeah, thank you. Public, any comments? From Don, Anton?
Several of us have our hands up.
I
Two
can't,
hands raised.
So we have two hands raised. The first, Mr. Grosny.
Thank you very much. You know, like most of you, I was shocked when just a day and a half after I left the CBOC, staff placed on the agenda their proposed new board policy 7214.2. This was the most regressive attempt to date to turn the CBOC into little more than those cardboard cutouts of fans we see at sporting events. It was as if they wanted to be able to tell the regulators that they had the community oversight without actually letting them see the data, talk about the data, meet to hear about the data, or even to report on the data. No one on the CBOC admitted to knowing that this new board policy, nobody on the board admitted to knowing that this new board policy, a policy that was in reality a staff policy, was even on the agenda. I appreciated that Dr. Walden Lewis called me late that Friday afternoon to give me a heads up about it. This was the evening prior to a 3-day weekend where board members, local elected officials, and community leaders might be busy with their families or other holiday events. And the first evening when the district was back to work, the board held a special called board meeting, occupying much of their day and evening. And anyone who has dealt with the board members will tell you that they all pretty much advised us not to try to contact them on the day of their meeting, which was the night after the Tuesday night meeting. And then the board was only going to give us 90 seconds to comment on this? That was insulting. I tried to warn Dr. Hurst that sending it back to the facilities committee was the wrong approach. The facilities committee is staffed by the two people who submitted this to begin with, and then is chaired by a board member that last December advocated for most of the draconian rules we saw in this. I have since suggested to Dr. Hurst that this be held from the facilities committee until we could discuss it with them. I warned him that the facilities committee would probably place it on the agenda for this week's meeting. And guess what? There it is. When I met with Dr. Hurst last Monday, I tried to bring him up to speed about the bond program and the CBOC. We spoke for nearly an hour, but before he had to head off to another meeting, he suggested that we arrange for a follow-up meeting right away, but for more than an hour. It took his staff nearly a week to get back to me and tell me that he had a 45-minute slot a month from now. I have since warned him that the whole world may change while he tries to find the time to learn about this. He seemed receptive to setting up a meeting right away. I also advised him that we need to start with the version that was negotiated between the governance committee, senior staff, including the superintendent, and the CBOC. I believe there are tweaks that need to be made, but this was a good starting point. I also stressed the need to bring in key stakeholders, which included former CBOCers that were well acquainted with the bond program. I further stressed the need for this to be an actual discussion and not the typical 90 seconds from non-board members. We'll see how and where this goes, but I am not optimistic about Wednesday's facilities meeting. Now, I also have comments, prepared comments, brief comments about some of the background material. I don't know if you'll allow me to present those or not.
Well, go ahead. Sally's got an hour yet.
Well, thank you very much. On the grand jury report, item number J.F, I was on the CBOC when this grand jury report came out. As much as I appreciated the effort that went into drafting this report and the importance of the grand jury making this information public, there were errors in this report, numerous errors. The grand jury can only work with the information they're provided, and I suspect that some members of the community that brought this to the attention of the grand jury flavored the data with their own opinions, and the grand jury accepted this information as gospel without being able to verify it. A case in point is where the report states that individual board members appointed their own representatives, when that has never been the case. Even back then, board members could nominate an applicant, but it has always been the prerogative of the full board to discuss and either approve or reject an applicant. And this was always done at a public board meeting. I'll have more comments when you go to the next item, but I want to then reinforce that this grand jury report was not written by the finger of God and should not stand alone. There were numerous sets of comments provided to the grand jury that are not included here. My own set of comments, which were extensive, pointed out not only the validity of some of the findings, but also some of the flaws, but you're not seeing those here. The last comment, again, brief item on J.G, the continuity or the compliance and continuity report. As I mentioned earlier, there were problems with this grand jury report and even with the official response from the district. For lack of a more polite word to describe the district's responses, there may have been some misrepresentations in their responses. For instance, with recommendation number 4, the district wrote that they would provide the CBOC with detailed financial data 7 days in advance of the board meetings. Has anyone received that data yet? I know I certainly haven't. With recommendation number 5, the district wrote that the CBOC had full access to the CBOC website. We fought for years for this, but it was less than 9 months ago that it was finally made a reality. When I set up the CBOC website more than a dozen years ago, I had access to it and had access for several years afterwards. But after I was termed out the first time, that access disappeared. With recommendation number 6, the district wrote that staff would not change the CBOC site without permission from the CBOC chair. That certainly was not the case, not even close. With recommendation number 9, the district wrote that they provide CBOC members with at least 6 training items mentioned. In my 10 years on the CBOC, I received none of those and barely anything else. With recommendation number 10, the district wrote the most laughable response, that the board would follow their own policies. I've been told by at least one board member that their policies are only guidelines and they don't have to follow them. And lastly, while the district provided responses, most were either laughable jokes, misrepresentations, or vague promises to be ignored before the ink was even dry. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on this.
I'll just comment on that. I think the 3 of us agree with you on the last part about the grand jury, their response to the grand jury. I also say that what is most important in the grand jury report are the recommendations. A lot of times what you find in the body of the report won't necessarily jive with what someone that you're aware of said, although in reality, if you've been interviewed by a grand jury, you're not supposed to talk about it. That's what the real nuts and bolts of what comes out of those reports are those recommendations at the end. And I say that with having 2 years experience in doing that. So, yeah, Anton?
So we have another hand raised.
Oh, who?
Mr. Panis?
Okay, Tom.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson, members of the CBOC, and district staff. The proposed revision of Board Policy 7214.2 is an affront to the Ed Code as well as to the citizens of West County. It completely strips all independence whatsoever from the CBOC. I completely oppose this revision. and fully support going back to, as Mr. Gosney mentioned, the policy that was negotiated between the governance committee and the district staff last year. Thank you for your time.
And that's the last hand raised on this item.
All right. Okay, now we'll go on to the actual resolution itself. I guess I will read the resolution, or what's I guess the I will read the resolution and then we'll ask for a motion to consider it and then discuss it. Okay, resolution 21-1, revision of board policy 7214.2, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, CBOC. Whereas 5 of 7 West Contra Costa County Unified School District bond measures were set up for voter approval at a threshold of 55% instead of a 2/3 vote, and thus require oversight by a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee per California Education Codes section 1528, 15278, 15280, and 15282. These 5 are referenced here as Proposition 39 bond measures. For all Prop 39 bond measures, ballot measure language approved by the West Contra Costa County Unified School District's Board of Education promised voters an independent CBOC and strict citizens oversight. For example, in Measure R, under the heading Financial Accountability, the board promised all bond expenditures will be monitored by an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, Education Code section 17278, and sequence to ensure that funds are spent as promised and specified. Based on promises made about an independent CBOC and strict citizens oversight in bond measured language, it is reasonable that all voters would expect a CBOC that is exact, demanding, rigorous, autonomous, and self-governing, and anything other than that would be perceived by voters as promises not kept. California Education Code 15278, established by Prop 39 CBOCs as independent entities as follows. The governing board of the school district or community college shall establish and appoint members of an independent citizens oversight committee. In 2015, the grand jury investigation of West Contra Costa Unified School District's Board of Education and CBOC, entitled Stymied Oversight, included 11 recommendations, all focused on the independence of the CBOC from the Board of Education. A proposed revision to board policy 7214.2 that would allow district managers to choose CBOC members, tell the CBOC how many meetings they can have, set the agenda for CBOC meetings, and review and filter CBOC reports. This erroneously assumes district managers and the Board of Education are authorized to exercise such authority over the CBOC, which is not explicit in the Education Code. It is inconsistent with the definition of an independent CBOC and strict citizens oversight explicitly promised to voters in Proposition 39 bond measure ballot language, and thus will most likely lead to distrust of all school-related ballot measures by local voters for years to come. And it also negates the 11 recommendations made by the California grand jury report in 2015. Be it resolved, the CBOC demands the following be done by West Contra Costa County Unified School District's Board of Education without delay. Reject consideration of changes to Board Policy 7214.2 proposed by district managers. Recommit to promises made to voters who approved passage of Prop 39 measures, specifically the West Contra Costa County Unified School District CBOC is regarded by both the Board of Education and district managers as an independent entity with exercising strict citizens oversight of bond control related expenditures. And the final point is implement the 11 recommendations made by the grand jury in 2015. With that, do I have a motion?
I move that this resolution be approved.
And I second. I'll second.
Okay. Okay, open for discussion. Lorraine?
I am for this resolution, but I would suggest that something be, since they're having a facilities meeting this in a couple days to talk about it, we're asking them to suspend it. So I think we should put in there when we send it to them something about that the immediacy of this is necessary, since the facilities meeting is moving on it right away. That's all.
So where would that go?
Well, part of the cover, you'll probably send this as a attachment, so that could be in the cover letter.
Okay,
Yeah, we say in that first sentence, demands the following be done without delay.
Yeah. But if they don't know that there's going to be a meeting this Wednesday to talk about, and there's nothing about discussion with the CBOC, it's just they're going to discuss it. So I think they're moving forward on it, but they're not including the CBOC at all in their discussions. That's all.
all right. Any other comments? Don? Anton? Tom?
Tom does have his hand up still.
Tom?
I'm sorry, I just didn't put my hand down. I fully support this resolution.
Okay.
If I
All
can,
right.
sorry, my only concern is I've heard this for years and years, that from board members, that we are an advisory board and making demands, they don't like to be told what to do. And I just worry about how they're going to react when they see that word demand on there. That's I stand behind the sentiments of it. I just worry about that word. Thank you.
Sally, do you have any comment on the word demand?
I think we have to be very strong and very clear, use language that's consistent with that. And they may be upset. That's entirely up to them, or they may understand that action needs to be taken now.
Yes.
I second Sally's comment. I think we've been really nice through, since I've been on the CBOC, and we've always, tried to word things in a way where, we're asking and we're willing to, work in partnership, and we're willing to, come to the table and be respectful when respect hasn't been given to us, when cooperation hasn't been given to us, when partnership is not at the table. So I think it's time that we kind of are, holding our ground. And I think being nice hasn't worked so far. Being so vulnerable to the needs of others without really focusing on what we're here to do. And we're here to make sure that we're representing the community you know, regardless of whoever's feelings get hurt. You know, we're here to do a job, and, you know, our job is not to, you know, shelter the board members from being angry at us. I mean, they're already angry. You know, they're already upset. So I think, you know, I'm all for, you know, demanding things, because being nice hasn't worked so far.
Anton has his hand up, John.
Anton, no, I'm not seeing those symbols. So go ahead, Anton.
This is Anton Young here. As you discuss the word demand, please be aware that the school board is proposing terminating all of your appointments. Firing all of you and appointing a brand new CBOC under a proposed policy that takes your independence completely away. Please understand that you have a board that in April of last year appointed a Measure R Oversight Committee, which President Phillips now says they never did. And there is no Measure R Oversight Committee, which is a violation of law, because should have been appointed a year ago. If you note on your minutes do not reflect that you are a Measure R Oversight Committee. So when we talk about the word demand, I would suggest you add a couple clauses that say to the effect that they rescind firing the current members of the CBOC, and that they implement their April 2020 resolution appointing members to the Measure R Oversight Committee for 2-year terms, which now they are not validating. Thank you.
John, can I say something about this?
Go
for a second?
ahead.
Okay, so I think we had some language in there that referenced membership in the CBOC, because we've seen a lot of action taken by the board, or more to the point, lack of action, that is confounding to us. We don't understand it, and people being taken off of the CBOC, such as Anton and Don, with no indication that these experienced people would be put back on. So we had language that we considered, and we took that out, deciding that we needed to take one step at a time, and that this language, this demand, we wanted to make as quickly as possible. And then I would agree with Anton that we need to come back and reconsider another resolution to address this question of membership of the CBOC, because it is very important. It's also much more highly complex. And so we need to act. That's my position. We need to act now. We need to approve this, and then we need to immediately turn our attention to the question of CBOC membership.
I think you and I had that discussion that we really need to focus on this, and that there is a second resolution that would address. We should consider drafting to address the other issue. It was just to be as focused as we could on this particular one. Is there any more discussion? If not,
Don?
yes, ma'am.
How about saying something about, we mentioned the board policy, how about talking about the resolution too, because that is, that was resolved, and I think that's part of what they should be looking at, don't you? That's all.
I lost you on that.
Oh, well, just like our resolution, we're sending it to the board.
Right.
Their resolution was to dissolve the board and then put in a new committee and then work under this new policy. Maybe we should mention something that we would like them to not to, where do we have it? Reject the consideration of the resolution and the changes to the board policy. And then that would put everything on a halt. What do you think of that?
You're talking about the resolution that was companion to this?
Yes.
Which you just said has already been approved by the board?
No, no.
Oh, they're considering the resolution that they are considering.
Yeah. I sort of thought they went hand in hand. They were putting all their whereases, like we have whereases, and then the object is to dissolve the committee and put in a new committee with this policy.
I'm gonna have to say, unfortunately, and this would be, I wish that it was otherwise, but the truth of the matter is that this is the first I've learned of this other resolution. So this would be an added element to this particular CBOC resolution, which I personally do not have enough information on right now. But again, it sounds like something that would be necessary to take up immediately after this.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of adding it.
Yeah, I believe that this needs to, if it needs to be out there as soon as possible, and then we just reshuffle on the other items, really. So
You have two hands up, John, just so you know. Anton and Dawn.
Don.
Just very quickly, you can't add any action on that resolution, which I strongly disagree with that resolution, but you can't add anything on there because it's a violation of the Brown Act. That's a brand new item and it hasn't been agendized or noticed.
Yeah.
So it would have to come back at a later date and time. Thank you.
Anton.
I'd like to follow up on Lorraine's suggestion in regards to the Facilities Committee meeting on Wednesday, rather than having it in John's transmittal to the committee. I would suggest that you add it to the resolution. And I would suggest that you have something to the effect that this matter be removed from the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 Facility Committee agenda to allow time to discuss with the CBOC. I think then that's part of the action of this resolution and will go forward in that manner. So I would suggest that that would be stronger language than having it in a cover memo.
Is there any violation of the Brown Act in doing it that way?
I don't think so, because part of the, you're just amending your current resolution. It's consistent with that resolution's intent, I believe.
Is this a separate bullet item?
Yes, I would say, yes, I would put that under as part of the resolve clause. Just because as you pointed out, this is on the agenda for Wednesday, and the fact that you give them this resolution, I think what you're wanting to do is have an opportunity to discuss this matter with the Facilities Committee before. I mean, they could move it out of the committee and put it on the June 23rd board meeting at this rate.
Do you want to repeat what you said? I didn't, or dictate it again?
I would say remove this matter from the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 Facility Committee agenda to allow time to discuss with the CBOC.
This matter being?
The matter of this whole resolution, the board policy if you want to say.
Oh, oh, I see. So this is not a new resolution that they're considering. This is
No.
the existing resolution.
Right, right,
I mean, the existing changes to the board policy.
correct. And that's what's on the agenda for Wednesday, which is the same as what was on the June 2nd special meeting agenda.
So change that first bullet that now reads reject consideration of changes proposed by district managers, et cetera, to change that to read remove.
Well, no, I think that's fine. I would just have it as a separate bullet. I think what you have there is fine.
Oh, okay, meeting.
And you can put it at the end if that, either place I think works. Have it the fourth bullet.
Mhm. Remove,
This matter from,
well, consideration of changes to board policy 7214.2
right, right,
from the June 16th, 2021 facility committee meeting.
right, to allow time to discuss with the CBOC. Which is, I think, is what we want. I mean, we don't want to have a 90-minute discussion or 90-second discussion.
90-second discussion.
Mhm. It's so, okay, so it's not a violation of the Brown Act. It is stronger language. I can support that. Unless somebody can raise an objection. And Don has his hand up.
Don,
I'm not disagreeing with any of this at all. The proper procedure is somebody would have to make a motion to amend the motion to
Mhm.
add this. You would then vote on that amendment.
Mhm.
If that amendment was passed, then you would be voting on the amended motion
correct.
for the resolution.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're correct, Don. We're just trying, so what I have here as the proposed amendment would say remove consideration of board policy 7214.2 from the June 16th, 2021 Facilities Committee meeting agenda.
And John, you might want to say changes to board policy 7214.2. Remove consideration of changes, just like we did in that first bullet.
Correct.
Okay. And then Anton had also added the phrase to allow time to discuss with the CBOC. Which would make sense, given the circumstances.
Hmm.
So I move
Let
that,
me
okay,
let me just make one last crack at
okay,
reading the draft. Okay.
okay.
This fourth bullet would read, remove consideration of changes to board policy 7214.2 from the June 16th, 2021 Facilities Committee meeting agenda to allow time to discuss changes with the CBOC.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So now we need a formal proposed amendment,
Yeah.
proposal of that amendment.
Action before the CBOC now accordingly, as you have suggested. Is that okay, Don?
Yeah, you're making a motion to amend the original motion.
Okay,
To
I am
include-
making a motion to amend the original motion
to include this new language.
to include this new language as the fourth bullet.
Mhm.
Do you have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Guadalupe?
Aye.
Passes 4-0.
And then you would have a vote on to accept the amended motion.
So do I have a motion?
Do we
to-
have to move to accept it?
Yeah, do I have a motion to accept the amended resolution 21-1?
I so move.
Second,
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Guadalupe,
Aye.
Lorraine,
Yes.
I'm yes. The motion carries
Good.
4-0.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
when, we asked them to remove it from the meeting on the 18th.
It's the 16th.
Or the
16th.
16th, I'm sorry. Will they have time to do that? I mean,
I'll get it out. I'll get this out to him tonight.
okay, good, good.
So that gives them yeah, but that's the,
I was thinking they don't have to do that in an official meeting, do they?
No, they can remove it at the meeting on Wednesday,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, good,
just like they removed it on June 2nd.
yeah.
Okay, now, back up to, item H. So the consent items, we pulled item minutes, February 8th, 2021 from the consent agenda.
Mhm.
And the other items that are still on the agenda are approved without with unanimous consent. Okay, annual report update, Lorraine.
Yes. Doesn't Anton have, don't we have to speak about that? If we're coming up for it? I mean, Anton wanted to say something about the minutes.
Okay, let's go back to that. So the February 8th minutes. Anton.
Yes, if we could look at page 72 of the agenda packet. And it has to do with question 11 in regards to capitalization of expenditures in the June 30, 2020 audit report. And we discussed this at the last meeting, and this answer is not consistent. If you go to the agenda page 63, please. And you'll notice down there under question 11, there were write-offs, and the staff will provide the CBOC a listing of those items. So yeah, right there. So that is correct. There were $6.6 million of write-offs that were verified in the audit report. I sent a copy of that audit report page to John and
Oh, hold it, Anton, if I can interrupt. That point, staff will provide a written response for all 14 questions. Now, what you're looking at on page 63?
I'm looking at page 72. where it says all 2020 expenditures from the measure were capitalized. And the point is that there was $6,611,159 that were written off. And that's documented on page 19 of the school district comprehensive audit report. So that response is wrong.
Right, but we didn't discover that until after these minutes, after that meeting.
Well, you documented it on page 63. You're saying that there were write-offs. So you can't say in one place on page 63, there were write-offs, and on page 72 say there weren't any. And the point is there was 6.6 million. So however way you want to do it's fine with me. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to put on page 72 the same language you have on 63, I'm fine with that.
All right, I have to look at this, you know, and I've gone back through the audio transcript of this, and okay. All right, now on to Lorraine's report.
Well, what is the action on this minutes? Are they going to be brought back again?
I would expect so, since they're not approved.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Lorraine.
Yes, mine is going to be very short. Because we had hoped to bring the annual report out this month, but because of John becoming the chairperson and the thing with the board policy and all, we just didn't have time to do it. Joseph is working on the pictures. We have to do the, I have the material to add to the report. Like for instance, the material on the, Don gave me on the priorities committee, and I just have to put it in it. It's fine tuning that has to be done. It's not ready for publishing right now. So we'll bring it out next month. And I hope I don't have to say this again. That's all.
Yeah, it's been a bit hectic here since we last met. All right, with that, we're at the point of adjournment with the present agenda. Our next meeting is July 12th at 2 p.m. And if there are no objections, I'll adjourn us by unanimous consent. Thank you.
Sorry, if I can, sir, I couldn't get my hand or my cursor to the raised hand quickly enough. A comment on Lorraine's report.
Yes, sir.
I'd say this is the exact reason why it is so dangerous to limit the size of the CBOC to only the 7 mandated positions. There aren't enough people to go around to do the work. I mean, we only have really the annual report committee. We no longer have an audit subcommittee. We don't have any site visits or bylaws or anything, but we don't have enough people to go around because even when you've only got 7 people, some of these people have day jobs. Some of these people have other things on their plate other than just the CBOC. So there isn't enough people to go around to get the work done. And I think it's a big, big mistake to farm all of the CBOC work off on staff, to ask staff to do the work of the CBOC. So this is an argument that we can easily make to the board, to the facilities committee, to anybody else that's willing to listen. We need enough people to actually be able to do the work.
Mhm.
Enough said. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, John.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Well said, Don. Thank you, Anton and Don.
Real quick before everybody
And
leaves
Tom.
today. I just want to give a plug now that the meeting's adjourned. The 7-Eleven committee, I think most of you are probably aware of that. They're still looking for participants. The deadline date is being pushed out. So if anybody's interested, or if you know somebody that's interested in serving on the 7-Eleven committee, please let them know.
What is the 7-Eleven committee? I know it has to do with excess buildings or something.
It does. And so it's to review and analyze the surplus property that the district has and what potentially might be done with it.
Oh, I see.
Is that an independent committee?
It is. Oh, you asked me if it's independent, Anton.
Advisory. I think it would be
I
good
submitted
to
my
have
application earlier today.
somebody on it. I know Dr. Wald said at the meeting that he was talking about it, that we have some properties that are not used and to see about selling or renting them. But, you know, he came out about a year or so ago about talking about building apartments for teachers and things, affordable housing. So it's something they're probably, and they were going to use bond money for it. So I think one of the committee members might be interested in going on that. What's the date on the filing date on that?
So it's going to change. Or actually, it's down there now. So it has been revised already, June 23rd.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think maybe we can talk somebody into it.
Right.
I'll
Thank you.
email this over so that Mr. Anderson can share it with the committee. So I'll send the flyer right over.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye now.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.